Moshi Moshi.
Hello,
I'm Zeb Ramsbotham,
and I'm Annie Ramsbotham.
and we're the Rambling Ramsbothams.
Our journey might be rambling, but we hope this podcast isn't.
And Annie is worried that it's going to sound like we just stumbled out of bed.
I was like, what's your opener?
We didn't just stumble out of bed, but we did just stumble out of our living room.
Yeah.
Because for me, it's like the middle of spring break. So
it's been like a big holiday.
Yeah, I've been getting up, putting on sweatpants and a hoodie, laying around the house, and then going for a bike ride. So then putting on the cycling kit, coming home, immediately taking a shower, right back into sweatpants and a hoodie, and then laying around the house again.
The dream.
It's been great.
Yeah, and I've been playing some video games. Not really as much. I've never really been an avid gamer, but it sounds fun. And so Zeb got me a Final Fantasy 14 membership. Yeah. Is that what you call it?
I mean, I guess.
So yeah, I'm a gamer now.
Yeah. Okay. We'll see how long that lasts.
It's been fun.
Yeah. That's basically what I've been doing spring break, which it does sound like I've been pretty lazy, which admittedly I have been.
I mean, it's a vacation. It's like a staycation.
But last week I did ride like 22 hours.
Yeah,
so
it's a lot.
I did a lot of cycling, and I guess that's my plan again this week. But it's getting to the point, in like breaks where it's just like time is getting a little loose.
Yeah, like it's Tuesday and doesn't feel like a Tuesday.
Yeah. It didn't start happening until last weekend on Saturday. And then I kept forgetting, I kept thinking it was Sunday, but it was just Saturday. And that's like when my time got
It's kind of a good sign though. It means you're like getting rested, like ready to get back to work,
I guess I'm ready to get back out there. Not really, but it's been really good. But it's been a while since we've sat here.
I know.
So that's another thing that's messing me up because our routine has been so off.
Hello
so
again.
It feels weird to be sitting in here.
Yeah, because the last couple episodes we pre-recorded, and then I went out of town. And then, I guess if you signed up for our newsletter, you would have stayed updated because that just went out yesterday. If you haven't, you can go to ramblingramsbothams.com and sign up. Yeah,
and that's an issue of, I thought that the 30th was the last day of March. I didn't realize that March had a 31st, so I like frantically sent out the newsletter on the 30th.
Oh, yeah.
And then I realized,
still March.
Yeah, I was like, oh, wait, there's another day. I usually send it out the last day.
I use that mnemonic. Is it a mnemonic where it's like 30 days hath September, April, June, and November? Do you know that one?
Oh, no, I don't know that one.
All the rest have 31, except for February that has 29. I don't know what you call that because doesn't rhyme, but it helps me remember it.
I don't know. People I knew always did the thing where you like count your knuckles.
Oh, yeah.
But that one I never understood.
I know. I wish I understood that. It seems really simple. But everyone's always like, look, let me show you. It's like knuckle, gap, knuckle. I don't know.
Yeah, I never understood it. So I just forgot that March had 31 days. So yeah, we're back.
Yeah, we have a couple messages to read. We didn't get like a ton of emails or anything, but one was from your mom, from my mother-in-law, and it says, "No secret how much I love the Netherlands. I remember the moment I utterly fell in love with the place. It was 1977, and I was staring out the hotel window in Amsterdam, and I was gobsmacked over the color of the sky. Vermeer blue, I call it now. I have a lifelong love of clouds and skies and sunrises and sunsets." So that was fun.
Yeah.
There's a whole other email that I won't read that it was very nice to receive from her. She's a really good writer. But she's talking about that because a couple episodes ago we talked about our decision to move to the Netherlands, and his mom is always very supportive, but I liked hearing her thoughts about her personal memories about how much she likes the Netherlands herself.
Yeah.
Another fun message we got was on YouTube from ChamCham5561. They said, "Congratulations, this sounds like a really exciting and appropriate choice."
Yeah.
That's very friendly.
I'd agree with that. I think it feels appropriate. I mean, we love cycling, and yeah, it's a great country for cycling. So.
And then on a completely different note, is on our Instagram messaged that, "So happy you're on the Shimanami Kaido. I rode it this time last year with my husband from Onomichi to Imabari." And that's a good segue into what I wanted to talk about first.
Yeah, because we had to pre-record the episodes because Annie was away on a work trip.
I was on the Shimanami Kaido, and yeah, I had been wanting to go for a long time because everybody talks about it here. You know, they're like, oh, what are your hobbies? And I'll be like, cycling. And they'll be like, oh, you must ride the Shimanami Kaido since you like cycling and you're in Japan. It's like...
Yeah, even like in Japan, Japanese people say it to us. And also like internationally, it seems like that's what people know about cycling in Japan.
Mm-hmm. Which that area has done a really good job with marketing. So... If you've never heard of the Shimanami Kaido, which I hadn't before we moved here, it's a expressway that connects the main island of Honshu to Shikoku. But along the expressway, they've done a really good job of creating bike infrastructure and bridges and lanes, specifically like dedicating entire lanes just for bikes. So it's a really safe way to get to enjoy seeing that whole area by bike. It connects Onomichi in Hiroshima Prefecture to Imabari in Ehime Prefecture. And it goes through 9 of the Geio Islands, which includes like Oshima, Omishima, Inoshima. You might have heard of some of these. They're all pretty small, but very cute.
And if you couldn't tell, Shima is island.
That's true.
So when you read something in Japanese, except with Hiroshima...
It is still the island kanji, but I don't know why, because it's not an island.
But often, and sometimes it gets changed to Jima.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
So, yeah, that was a really cool experience. The whole thing is 60 kilometers if you just go straight from one side to the other, which is about 37 miles for fellow Americans. But there are kind of side quests along the path. So there's a different route called the Tobishima Kaido on the east. There's like a chain of eastern islands. You can get over there by ferry and then connect on those bridges. And then you can go to the west to the Umeshima Kaido. Yume means dream, so like the dream islands.
Or it could be nightmare.
Well, yeah, I guess it could be any dream. That's true. Does Japanese not specify between a dream and a nightmare?
No, I think Yume is just dream and nightmare, and then it depends on the context of the conversation.
I never really thought about how dream is not inherently a good thing, but that's a whole other aside.
Could be foreboding. I had a dream last night.
But, yeah, it was really cool. I think it's interesting that they promote just doing the whole Shimanami Kaido at once almost. Like, they should have made it wind more. You know, like, it goes just on the edges of all the islands, so you kind of, because it follows the expressway, maybe that's why they did it, but you kind of blow through the islands. What they could have done, maybe, this probably would have been more expensive, but if they made it longer, people wouldn't be able to do it in a day, or it would be less fun to do in a day. You know, and then you would have to spend the night on the islands and extend your tourism there. You know what I mean?
I think, though, that they're already assuming that people aren't going to do that in a day.
I guess.
I think, like, because this is maybe kind of my thought of the Shimanami Kaido, is it's really more for, like, sightseeing and tourism is the vibe I'm getting. Like, would you go there for a training ride?
No. Because sometimes it would be dangerous to ride fast.
That's what I'm thinking. So I'm already assuming that they probably, like, think 60 kilometers is, like, more than people would want to ride in a day.
So.
Because if you think about generally how cycling is treated in Japan, like if I ever talk to my coworkers about going for a ride, they sometimes can't really wrap their heads around where I go. Like they'll ask me like, oh, like, where do you ride your bike? And I'll tell them like, oh, up to like Nakanoto or something like that. And they can't.
Well, I guess it's just like any hobby. I mean, it'd be like
a
5K runner talking to a marathon runner. Like I can't fathom running a marathon.
Well, even
casually.
someone that doesn't run talking to someone that does run.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking like for this road, like I think it's already like 60 kilometers. They're probably already thinking like, oh yeah, you're going to like
maybe so. I mean,
stop.
Even us, like if we were to do it, we could do 60 kilometers in a day, no problem. But I wouldn't want to, you know, because I would want to like get off of the main road and kind of see the rest of the island and then rejoin the Shimanami Kaido and then keep going. You know, if you did part of the Shimanami Kaido, got on a ferry, did the Tobishima, stayed there next day, you know, if you connected them all as you made your way to Shikoku, I think it could be a really cool multi-day, like 4-day thing if you wanted to. I don't know.
Goodness.
And I know people do that. It's not like a mind-blowing suggestion, but I just thought it was interesting that they kind of seem to market it as more of a come do this one ride, not like a week-long. Maybe I just wasn't understanding the marketing very well.
Yeah, I don't think I've heard like much marketing about it other than like, oh, go to that region and like ride in that area.
Well, one of the islands, the Enoshima, they have a really cute mascot. The egg at Wakutama-kun in Wakura Onsen here in Ishikawa is still my favorite mascot. But this mascot is a lemon, like a kind of anthropomorphized lemon, riding a bike. He's not always riding a bike, but because there's so much cycling there and there's so much citrus. Actually, some of the best like tangerines I've ever had, I had last week. But he's really cute. He's one of my top mascots now, I think. We should put a picture of him on our Instagram.
Can't believe it.
His name is Hasakun.
Wow.
Yeah. He has a little leaf sprouting from his hood. And his stomach, kind of like Teletubby style, he has the no character. I guess because Enoshima, I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was very cute. The other kind of cool thing about the Shimanami Kaido is that it has the world's second longest suspension bridge at the very end, crossing the Kurushima Strait. And that's, like the very last hop from the final island to Shikoku, which is one of the main 5 big islands. Like sometimes I'm like, oh, it's when you get from mainland Japan to the other one, but there really is no Honshu, I guess, is mainland Japan, but there's no
Well, I guess
mainland.
again, anything with Tokyo and Osaka on it is going to be considered the mainland.
Just because it's the biggest island, but it's a whole string of islands, really. But
yeah, that's also where most people live. So
yeah, so you can cross the Kurushima Strait on this bridge, which is over 4,000 meters, 2.5 miles. Again, if you're American, which is really long. Like we just kept biking on the bridge, and I kept being like, wow, we're still like not on the other side. Which I know that there are other bridges. I looked up in China, the longest bridge in the world. It's 105 miles.
yeah, Annie was telling me about like, oh, she told me she was going to ride on the second longest bridge in the world.
I thought it was that.
And so I was like really curious. I was like, oh wow, that's like pretty neat. And this is where I got into like a little rabbit hole about bridges that some people would say like, oh, well, the suspension bridge is like the true type of bridge.
Yeah.
So that's like the metric by all bridges are measured. But then there are other bridges which are like, I don't know, I don't really understand it.
Yeah, you can also measure it by the longest length that is suspended, like the longest distance between the pillars, kind of. This is the second longest suspension bridge structure. It's
just such a funny, like, nitpicky.
I guess
like,
so.
Getting really deep into like, well, is it really a bridge?
And the fact that it's second makes it even less interesting. I still think it's impressive, but until 2022, it was the longest suspension bridge structure in the world. And then Turkey, there's a bridge in Turkey that surpassed that in 2022. So I don't know, maybe it's not that cool anymore, but it was still a really interesting, very long, probably the longest bridge I've ever been on.
I would imagine, because I mean, maybe we've been on like a longer bridge that's like, not a bridge. Somewhere like driving or on a train, but definitely like riding.
Yeah, definitely on a bike. And you have an entire lane. I mean, the whole time, the lane is just for bikes, which is really cool. There are times where you get onto the island and then you share the road. It's just a small 2-lane road with cars and things, like a regular neighborhood road. But for the huge expressway style roads, you're completely separate from the cars, and it feels really safe. Like there are barriers between you and the car lane.
I mean, I guess kind of like our little bike lane that goes up the coast.
Yeah, that's true. Here in Ishikawa.
So this one, I'd imagine, though, is pretty well taken care of.
Yeah, there's no like sand or anything on it. I mean, it's a major tourism draw.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was really neat. The other thing I learned is that Naruto means whirlpools. I guess because I didn't really watch anime growing up. I mean, I know the show Naruto, but I didn't know that he's named for a whirlpool. Like that's the same word as...
Well, I don't think he's named for a whirlpool.
Oh, what's he named for?
So this is like pretty obscure. I think I'd have to double check this. So the little like fish cakes you get in ramen that have the swirls? I also think those are called Naruto.
After a whirlpool, though. I guess, okay, I'm Googling it now, and it means south wind, but also, yeah.
I mean, I'm sure it can mean a lot of different
I don't know
things.
if it's like egg or chicken, but like chicken or egg thing, but yeah, it's also the fish cake roll in cup noodles.
Well, I think the fish cake roll looks, because it's got the spiral in it. But then it's confusing because you wouldn't really say, oh, well, you can't jump the intermediary thing.
Interesting. Yeah, so...
You can't say like, oh, well, you're named after a whirlpool. And it's like, well, really, like, my mom loved ramen, so she named me after a fish cake.
Well, okay, so Naruto
but
has
the fish cake's named after...
Naruto has a bunch of different meanings, but I guess the swirling thing is a Naruto.
Yeah.
And it also is what you call like a narrow strait where the tides create large swirls. So when you are on the bridge, you can look down and see a bunch of Naruto.
That's kind of scary.
It is a little scary, but I mean, no one's swimming down there.
Well, yeah, it's just kind of like whirlpools are frightening.
They are.
I'm not really a fan of that.
Well, yeah, neither of us are really ocean people, are we?
Not really, no.
So that was pretty cool to finally be able to go and see that. And another really cool thing that I got to see while I was in that area, this was on the Tobishima Kaido, so if you go to the west of the main Shimanami Kaido, this is the Yume Kaido. Anyway, on the island Osaki Kamijima, which is such a long name, very cool. Sounds like a very powerful island, doesn't it? They have, Zeb is like rolling his eyes at me, but they have a soy sauce place, Okamoto Shoyu, and I know I've talked about making soy sauce here, which is probably another reason why Zeb is like, okay, we've heard about soy sauce, but I have never seen open fermentation soy sauce.
I can't believe it.
Okay.
It's like the Saison of the soy sauce world.
Yeah, it did have like a very like beer making vibe to it. So these barrels are just open to the air, and you're in kind of the second floor of this attic warehouse type thing on this family's soy sauce factory is a kind of a too much of a word. Like, I don't know, it's just a small family production shop. I don't know. But they have 100-year-old barrels that are made out of tsugi, which is, I think, cedar.
Yeah.
And yeah, the air can just blow in and out of the top of this warehouse, bringing, whatever natural fermentation process into that room, which sounds kind of gross, but...
Well, I mean, that is the same thing with like Saisons and sourdough breads.
Yeah.
Are the same thing. It's just open air.
Yeah.
Like it's whatever yeast you happen to catch.
Yeah, exactly.
And like takes root there. And then I guess that's why people argue like, oh, it creates a unique flavor.
Yeah, because it can only be from that air, like that sea air that blows in. We couldn't make it in the mountains,
Yeah, so this is a huge aside, but that's why people make fun of French sourdough.
Oh.
Because some people will buy like a super expensive sourdough starter from France, or like on holiday in France, they'll buy a sourdough starter and take it home. And it's like maybe for the first, 5 weeks or whatever, it has some of that French bacteria, but then pretty soon it's just taken over by whatever bacteria you have in your house.
That's true, because it's a living thing.
Yeah.
I didn't really think about that.
There's a really cool Egyptian study where they found like yeast in a clay pot, and then they set up this whole crazy room to like try and bring the yeast back so that it wouldn't have outside interference, to try and like recreate like that.
Like the bread that the Egyptians tasted.
Yeah. There was a
Did
study
it work?
about it. I don't really remember. I'd have to read it again or
That's
look it up.
such an interesting idea, though.
Yeah.
There's this is also an aside. There's like a 100-year-old soup stock that people keep like adding to, and you can take it. Okay, it sounds gross. I don't know.
Well, it's as long as like the temperature doesn't drop underneath a certain level, there's not going to be like bad bacteria growing in there. It's the one that was in Bangkok.
Yeah, theoretically, you boil it and it kills off the bacteria.
Yeah.
But then you also reuse it every day. Like you keep adding to it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not supposed to be gross, and it's there's one that it's called perpetual stew, I guess. There's also one in Japan. And yeah, I did see the Bangkok one. But then apparently so oden is what it is in this Tokyo restaurant, which we have a lot of oden in Kanazawa. It's kind of like a dashi broth, and then you boil, especially in the winter, it's kind of a cozy thing. But this one in Tokyo has been continually replenished since 1945. Apparently the only reason it doesn't date back to 1916 is because the original soup was lost in a World War II air raid, which is so sad.
We lost the soup in the war.
I know.
Sorry, yeah.
But
anyway, back to soy sauce.
Sorry. So yeah, that was pretty cool. But I got to get a bottle of 3-year-old fermented soy sauce and brought it back. And what did you think?
It's pretty good.
It's very rich.
Yeah, it is like a richer soy sauce, but I also don't know if that's just because we typically buy the low sodium soy
really
sauce.
Like really cheap soy sauce.
Yeah, we're buying like the store brand low sodium soy sauce, which yes, so this soy sauce is much better. But it'd be interesting to do a taste test. We need to get like a little bottle of like Kikkoman or something, and then we could do like a taste test. So
I did get to do a taste test when I was in the soy sauce factory.
Straight from the vat.
Straight from the barrels. Not exactly, but so they do 1 year, 2 year, and 3 year fermentation. And the process up until the fermentation is pretty much the same no matter whether you're this kind of old school boutique soy sauce or you're just regular Kikkoman, making huge batches. You have to get the soybeans kind of into this mash that then will sit. And then from there, Kikkoman and like kind of, I don't know, big brands, they'll do it as quickly as possible to maximize profit. So maybe just ferment for a couple weeks. The thing that sets this company apart is they'll let it sit for 1 year to 3 years, which is hugely risky because while we were there and we were looking at the different barrels, there was one barrel that he was like, oh, so here's an example of a vat that's gone off. And you could see it was like a different color than the rest. And it was a 2-year batch and something had just gone wrong with it. And so they just couldn't use it. And that's luckily, they make several batches, but that's so much time to just be like, well, that entire barrel we can't use. The other cool thing is that they use the entire soybean.
The whole bean.
Yeah, well, some places, like
some
people, the big brands.
I'm going to remind you this when we don't have any of these bottles of fancy soy sauce anymore.
That's why we have to cherish it.
Slurping down our cheap low sodium.
I'll still buy the cheap low sodium, but now that I've tasted the really good stuff, I can appreciate both. It's not cheap for a reason. But they use the entire bean, and so it's got all the protein and the fat still in it, instead of just the powder that the big brands use, almost like a byproduct of the soybean. They'll take off the other stuff and use that for, like, I don't know, soy powder and things.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
What an experience.
What an experience. I thought it was pretty cool. And that island is only accessible by ferry. And so cool. If you go, you can get on a boat, go over there and buy some soy sauce.
Yeah, you were on a lot of boats.
Yeah.
Every day you were like sending me something about like trying to make it to the ferry.
Well, yeah, that area has a ton of ferries.
I mean, it makes sense.
And ferries kind of make me a little nervous sometimes, but the one from Imabari to Osaki Kamijima, that was the longest one that we did. So it was like an hour.
That's not bad.
No, you could see land the whole time.
Yeah. Just watch out for those whirlpools.
Yeah. I'm
Get sucked down.
Not a big seafarer.
Yeah. Well,
so
overall,
that was
I'm a big
my
fan.
trip.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was too short, like I wish I could have stayed longer.
Yeah, well, I think we'll go back because we have our road trip planned.
It's true.
So we'll probably be through that area.
Stay tuned. I can't wait.
Yeah. I think it'd be interesting because... Oh, yeah.
While we were there.
It snowed here, too.
I know. I can't believe it snowed. Because, so up here, it snows a bunch. And so when you were saying, oh, there's snow in the forecast.
Though, it was like March 22nd, I think,
it's
and
pretty
it snowed.
Late.
Yeah, that might be the latest I've ever seen snow. I don't really know. But
well, yeah, down in the Hiroshima area, people were shocked. Like, the hotel front desk people, they were like, we're kind of concerned. Like, do you want us to call taxis for you? Because we were there to bike. And they were like apologetic. No one can change the weather, but they were just like, we don't usually see snow at all here, especially not at the end of March, so...
Yeah, it was a pretty interesting time because we had, it was like the second to last week of March, we had this kind of unusual cold snap where it just got really cold again, and it snowed here like 2 or 3 days. Of course, it never stuck, but yeah, it was definitely a bit of a shock to the system.
Yeah. Which is probably why the cherry blossoms are delayed.
Yeah, unfortunately, we're actually still waiting for our cherry blossoms, and I get, things on my phone that's like, here's a memory from last year.
Yeah.
And this time last year, we were riding around looking at cherry blossoms, and this was supposed to be their peak, according to the Japanese Meteorological Agency.
Yeah.
But I
Even
guess
as
they
far
couldn't-
as the 9th forecast. Because, they release the forecast as soon as they can because cherry blossoms are a big deal here.
Yeah, and then they keep updating it.
Yeah. So even while it was snowing, the 9th forecast had been published, and it was like, yeah, right now they're blooming, and you're looking around and they're like buds still.
Yeah, there's like no cherry blossoms. There have been some like there are different varieties of trees, and some of the early ones did have blossoms like even back in like February, like, especially in Tokyo where it's much warmer.
And the plum blossoms, which are different, but they look very similar. Like they're also just pink flowers on trees.
Yeah.
Those bloom really early.
Yeah, but there are other signs of spring.
Yeah.
It is finally warming up. Like we're kind of finally in some good weather, and we haven't been using our heat in our apartment anymore.
Yeah.
And there are other things going on, like graduation.
Yeah, the school year.
Yeah, so did you know that the Japanese school year is April through March?
Wow.
Do you know why?
No, actually.
It's the Japanese fiscal year. It's also
Oh.
April through March.
So they wanted them to match.
Yeah, so in 1900, under the Elementary Education Reform Law, the government made the school year match the fiscal year. So there are some other countries that have a similar school year, but of course, like in the West, this is very odd for us. Yeah, they're April through March. So right now, it's like, I'm calling it spring break, but it's kind of their equivalent of summer break, where they get 2 weeks off between the school years, and which really isn't like a lot of time off.
Yeah, they don't have the same really long summer break like America does, which I know we've mentioned before.
Yeah.
But
So that's what I was going to talk about a little bit in this episode, was the school year and what it's like.
yeah.
So just as a comparison, in Japan, the school year is 210 days of education, while in America, it's typically 180 days of education. So that's kind of like the national standards of both
It's
countries.
like a whole month more.
Yeah, there's some variation depending on the state. And this is true. So the Wikipedia article had a funny note. It says, Japan, a significant part of the school calendar is taken up by non-academic events.
Which you have kind of like mentioned before to me. Like,
Yeah, and I've mentioned it on the podcast before, and it is absolutely true. So it's funny to note that, yeah, Japan has about 30 more days of instruction per year.
maybe just school days where you're at the school,
Yeah,
but
it's
you're
kind
not
of like,
in classes.
yeah, there's definitely, a lot of like time at the school where the students aren't actually doing coursework. They're just at the school, and the school is open. So there's some really interesting stuff. And then I also learned that traditionally many schools have Saturday classes, which would explain the amount of high schoolers maybe you see in their uniforms on the weekend.
We do see a bunch. I always assumed that like they were going to extracurricular stuff that they needed a uniform for.
Yeah, so as recently as 2002, there was a reform that made the school days on Saturday non-mandatory. But many schools apparently are bringing them back.
I wonder how like non-mandatory, because with sports practice in the U.S., a lot of schools they're not allowed to make like football, like early season football practice is not mandatory. But it's kind of like, if you don't come, you probably won't make the team. So it's like not mandatory, but you kind of need to be there. So it's a little bit unfair.
Yeah.
I wonder if the school is like that.
I don't know, because I do know that, so my school doesn't have Saturday school, but a lot of students still go to hang out like at the school on Saturdays.
That's kind of cute that like all their friends are there, and then they're like, well, I don't have to do anything today. I'll just go be social with my friends. I mean, hopefully that's what they feel like. Hopefully they don't just feel like, I gotta be at school.
Yeah.
I gotta pass or something.
Yeah, I don't know. So mine doesn't do Saturday school, but is a thing, so that could help pad those 210 days. And so when do you start going to school? Well, in Japan, you start going to school when you're 6, and that's based on your school year age, which is kind of like when we talked about the coming of age ceremony. If you're 6 between April 2nd, 2024, and April 1st, 2025, you'll be attending school.
It's similar to the US. I was just looking, and when you're 5, you start kindergarten. 5 or 6, but it's not as like set on an age. Like,
Yeah, this
I know
is very
sometimes
tied
guys
to like,
go later than girls.
you can go later or you can go early. It's up to your parents. They can kind of petition because there is a cutoff, but I can remember, so my cousin Will, we were technically going to be in different years.
Because you guys are 6 months apart.
Yeah, so I was December 1991 and he was May 92. And that was like a big enough gap where they were telling him, oh, you need to be in the next year. But we got to go in the same year.
That's good.
So, yeah, and then so in Japan, the school years are 1 through 6. That's elementary school. And then 7 through 9 is middle school, or sometimes called junior high school. And then 10 to 12 is high school, sometimes called senior high school. And that 10 to 12 is not mandatory. You don't have to do that. So technically, you finish school in 9th grade.
That's
and
like,
then,
you're probably 14. That's crazy that after 14, school's not compulsory anymore.
yeah.
Although it's another thing where it's like mandatory, not mandatory, because you don't have to go, but like kind of good luck finding a job if you don't keep going.
I guess it depends on the industry. I don't really know.
That's true. I mean, I guess if you have the skill.
Yeah, overwhelmingly, most kids go to senior high school. So go through 10th to 12th. So that's kind of the general layout of like school year structure and kind of what is happening. But I thought it'd be interesting a little bit to talk about like, so what's actually happening in the school. So this is like my perspective. I'm in a senior high school.
And the end of year, you mean?
Yeah. So I'm a senior high school teacher, and it's really weird because this is a very weird part of the year. And so it could depend on the school that you're at. But my school, it's kind of like since February, the students haven't really been like doing class.
Like learning anything new?
Yeah, it's kind of strange. So there are a lot of breaks throughout the year. So we had just had a winter break, and then we came back, and like January was kind of like a little bit of instruction, and then they started preparing for their exams. And then in February, they had exams, and it seems kind of early because like your school year is not over until March. So they had their exams like end of February, and then they kept coming to school.
What would you do after exams?
Well, we had some sports days. We had some like award ceremonies. We had some closing ceremonies.
Yeah.
It was kind of like a lot of filler, it felt like, to get us to the end of the year. And then also during that period in March, they're doing the entrance exams for kids that want to come to the high school. And so the kids who are currently attending high school, they're not allowed to come to school that day.
Oh, that's so interesting.
So they're like some days when the school's closed, but other kids are coming.
That is a difference with the U.S. because in the U.S., if you have to go to high school, actually, you don't.
Yeah, you have to go to high school.
You have to go to high school.
Depends on the state. Some
don't have
states
to.
you can be 16 and then you can leave.
You don't have to test into high school.
No, you just go. Yeah.
And in Japan, you do test because you get to pick which high school, or you kind of have to test into it if it's a really high-performing high school.
Yeah. So each high school kind of has like their barrier of entry, which is kind of the levels that you need to get on the test to get accepted. So you go to the high school and you take the test. So that's going on. But it's really interesting because January 25th, we had an achievement award ceremony. And then the third year students had their exams the very end of January, beginning of February. And then while their exams are going on, the first and second year students are still just doing class. And then February 9th, the third year students were done. So they were just like...
completely done.
Yeah, like they had finished their exams. And apparently they typically get the month of February to start preparing for college entrance exams and interviewing at jobs.
Okay.
Because you remember the fiscal year is tied to like the hiring season also in Japan.
And that's a pretty big difference too in Japan. Like companies, traditional, like big Japanese companies, they only hire once a year.
Yeah, they have like a hiring season where they'll have like an event. And yeah, you like kind of join the company with
so
that
much pressure
cohort.
To like leave high school and then be like, I have to get a job in this period or else, or to leave college. And that's kind of it for the year.
So I guess that's why they really give them like February and March to start preparing for...
That makes sense.
life.
So it feels like a break, but it's not a break. Like to you as a teacher, you're not teaching classes, but the students are preparing.
Yeah, and this is like an interesting note too, because of course I'm just an assistant language teacher. So I know that like the other teachers are helping the students either study or they're helping them like look for jobs. They really do give them a lot of like extra support. But then it wasn't until February 20th to 27th that the first and second year students had their exams. And then the graduation ceremony happens in early March. And that's so the third year students like leave and then they come back in early March for the graduation ceremony and then they leave again.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. Kind of like a closure.
Yeah. But this whole time, the first and second year students are still coming to school and hanging out.
Well,
and
they've still got classes.
Yeah, and we didn't have our closing ceremony for them until like March 25th or something like that. And then you're on spring break until the second week of April.
Yeah, I mean, I guess when you lay it all out like that, it makes sense. But in real time, it feels very slow or very like, when does class start? Because it's just a bunch of reviews, exams, sports days, ceremonies, break.
In real time, it's like a weird like 3-month block, especially because you just came back from winter break, which winter break was also like 2 weeks long. So kind of you have from the beginning of December until the beginning of April is this really weird, like, I don't know. There's like there's kind of a lot going on, but also it feels like nothing is going on. It's like a really interesting.
Maybe it just feels weird because in America we have the 3-month break. So school is very like 2/3 of the year. So you have to pack a lot more in so that you can have the 3 months totally off.
I guess so. It does seem like Japan has much more frequent and longer breaks throughout the year.
It's like a year-round school, kind of.
Kind of, because we have this 2-week break now. But then in summer, we'll still have almost 2 months completely off. Because really, like July 21st will be the last day in summer. And then they won't go back to school until like September 1st. So they have like a month and a half then. And then they come back. And then there's like kind of a fall break. And then there's also a winter break. And now we're in spring break, but then we'll go back to school for a month. And then we'll have Golden Week, where we're gone for like a week and a half again.
Yeah. It's kind of nice, though, honestly.
Yeah, it's not bad. Like, you
Hopefully,
have a lot of like little chunks to look forward to. So it's almost a little motivating because you can think like, okay, well, next month, like, I'll go back, I'll have 3 weeks of work, and then it's Golden Week.
I really liked summer break, though, as a kid. It just felt like an unfathomably long amount of time. Like, I just remember the school year would end, and you're like, 3 months? Like, I have so much time.
Yeah.
It's funny your, like, idea of time changes as you get older. I guess you've lived more amount of time, and so the scale continues to, like, decrease because you have more to compare to. But, yeah, I really liked having 3 months. So I don't know if I would have liked doing the year-round school type
I don't think
model.
I would have. Like, as just like a teacher and being there every day, I'd still miss like summer break.
Yeah.
Where it's truly, because
Truly
you do
off.
always have like a break to look forward to, but at the same time you're always like looking forward to going back to school.
Yeah.
Because it's like just enough time to kind of really like let yourself go, but it's not really enough time to totally let yourself go because you know like, oh, like, well, next week I have to start going back to work.
Yeah. But this, like, spring is the start of the new year, and so that's another reason why cherry blossoms are important, because they, like, it makes people think of graduation and stuff. And a lot of people will go take pictures, especially if they're graduating, and we saw a lot of that last month. Unfortunately, the cherry blossoms weren't there to take their photos with them, but we did see a lot of there was one day specifically, I guess it was a Saturday, but there were so many women at the station taking pictures with their diplomas, and they were wearing unique clothing, like different than kimonos. And so I looked it up later, and what they had on was hakama, which we talked about before, I forget which episode, but when we talked about kimono parts, men usually wear hakama, which are like kind of like pants. They were like really wide leg pants. They almost look like a skirt because
they're like pantaloons.
Yeah, because they're so wide, but they do have 2 like holes for your legs. But anyway, this is unique because women don't usually wear the hakama, but they'll wear them such as on occasions such as an entrance exam or entrance ceremony or graduation ceremony. And apparently it's kind of a remnant from the Meiji period, which is the late 1800s to like the early 1900s, and women would wear hakama as school uniforms. And so even though it's rare to see women wearing hakama to school in the current time, they'll still wear them for these graduation ceremonies as kind of a tradition, like a formal school tradition.
Yeah.
So,
it'd be interesting to know the like history. How did they go from wearing a hakama as a school uniform to skirts?
Yeah. I would assume it's because, like, do you think it's like American history where women didn't really go to school? It was kind of a guy thing. And so when the women did start going, they were like, well, I guess we'll just put you in the guy uniform too.
Yeah,
and then
but
it
I
became
guess
more like...
It's just interesting to think about how hard it flip-flopped. From like, oh, if that's the case, like, oh, we kind of really want you to kind of look like a guy to blend in with the atmosphere, to today where we want you to wear skirts, and some schools
no
even
exceptions.
ban wearing leggings, and it's kind of like, you have to wear a skirt.
It is
we need to see your legs.
It is pretty intense, like a really weird transition.
Yeah.
Hopefully school uniforms in general will get more relaxed. Like, I think it's fine to have a school uniform, but I don't think it's okay to make it so strict that you have to have black hair and you have to have white underwear and you can't wear leggings. Like, I think those kind of stipulations are too extreme.
Yeah, because I've talked about it before that I'm always super concerned when you see, girls who it's like snowing and it's freezing. And I know there's a lot tied into like, well, girls just want to be cute.
Yeah, some
so
of
they
that
want
I
to
think
dress up.
they're just wearing skirts to be cute.
Yeah. But then I was reading an article, and this can be a whole another episode one day, that apparently in Japan they're black companies, and the companies are known for kind of skirting the law, and they don't really treat their workers fairly. They're also...
So they're blacklisted? So they're like blacklisted?
No, they're just black schools or black companies where you can still work for them, but it's like dangerous. And so there are these companies that are just called black companies, and it's like a social known thing.
Like they're just on a list.
Yeah, I'm sure someone out there has a list. But every now and then you'll see people talk about working for certain ALT companies, and people online will be like, oh, don't work for them. They're like a black company. Like they don't like treat you right. But there are also in Japan black schools, and apparently it's a similar thing. Like they're just known for enforcing some of the older rules, kind of like, oh, you can't wear tights and you need to like have black hair and stuff like that. So there are some schools that enforce it, but it's pretty interesting.
It is. So yeah, maybe if you come in the spring, you might see women wearing hakama, and they're probably graduates.
Or hopefully cherry blossoms.
Yeah.
If you come right now, you'll see some. So
if you come to Kanazawa next week, so April, like the week of April 8th is supposed to be the new, like when the cherry blossoms are flowering. I don't know if it's peak, but definitely they'll be at least blooming then.
Yeah.
Which is much later. Some people, like on the internet, are kind of upset because of course people plan their trips based around cherry blossoms.
Plans. And I do get it. You could still go places in Japan and see cherry blossoms, but it's not going to be as widespread. So definitely a bummer if you missed it. But well,
do you have a word of the week?
Yeah. Do you want me to go first?
Yeah.
Okay, so my word of the week is Yoko.
Yoko. And you have it written here with kanji. Looks like sunlight or something?
Yeah, it's like sunshine.
Sunshine.
Which I was looking this up, and this is where, Japanese gets a little confusing because there are a dozen words for sunshine. So some of them are apparently more scientific. Some are a little more metaphorical.
That's kind of cool.
Some are kind of like literal sunlight and like sunbeam. And then some are
like sunshine.
Yeah, kind of like you can call someone like, hey, sunshine, like kind of
cheerful.
Like a nickname. Yeah. So I think Yoko is more of a standard, just sunshine. But that's my word because we finally have some sunshine.
Yeah. And I have heard this as like a name. So maybe that's why. Yeah,
there are other popular names like Hikari is also kind of like a sun gleam, like bright.
Sun gleam.
But that can also be a person's name. Yoko can be a person's name.
I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank goodness for sunshine. We've made it out of the winter.
I hope so.
My word is giri-giri. and it means just barely, or
Yeah.
like almost, like giri giri. I don't know. I learned it because a friend was trying to make it to the to get his car worked on a couple weeks ago, and he was like, oh, I made it 10 minutes before closing, giri giri. And I was like, I don't know what that means. And so I looked it up, and it's technically a mimetic word, which is different from an onomatopoeia, where an onomatopoeia is a word that sounds like the sound, but a mimetic word is supposed to describe the visual or physical thing that it's describing. So I don't know how that works really, but I guess giri giri kind of makes you think about like just barely in a certain way. I guess it does
because I hear people say it, so I know that that's what it means. So it's again like a chicken or the egg thing. Like when I hear giri giri, I do think, oh, just barely, but it's because I know that that's what people are meaning, you know?
I guess the other thing that I read, that it could have also come from kagiri, which means limit. So just past the limit, or like just to the limit. And then it became giri giri.
It's much cuter.
It is a cute word. So you can use that if you want to talk about almost or just about to be.
Yeah. This is a super aside. Last minute is people finally found out if they got accepted in the JET program or not. So if you listen this far and you're a JET applicant, let us know if you got in.
Yeah. I hope that everyone that really... I know that some people who really want it aren't going to be able to make it, and I do feel for you. And congratulations to the people who did make it. And if you didn't make it, there's nothing wrong with you, and you can try again next year, and you can always come visit Japan too. So yeah, just sending lots of well wishes to everyone, no matter which result you got. It's a really hard time to just be waiting.
Yeah. Well, thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you guys next week.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.